Hello, this is Virtualis the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. The King's Gambit is one of the most aggressive openings in chess. It was previously a very popular opening up to the late 19th century, and from what I've read, it is often described within the context of the Romantic era of chess. So big attacks, audacious sacrifices, tactical brilliancies. I believe it was for a time considered unsportsmanlike to decline a gambit. However, overly aggressive early attacks can leave deficiencies in defense. For my opponent, they could not recover from an early blunder, even though they played well for the rest of the match. Please enjoy! Alright, so let's start with the review. Chess.com's algorithm. I played okay, about 80% accuracy, and my opponent at around 70%. And as you can see, they made an early blunder and never really recovered after that. And even though I sort of made some mistakes and blunders of my own, I never got to the point where I lost the advantage. So let's now go have a look at the analysis to see what happened. So I had the black pieces, my opponent led with e4, I played e5, and now f4. So the King's Gambit. So obviously the opponent is gambiting their f-pawn. And the logic here is they end up deflecting one of my central pawns and potentially have an opportunity to now dominate the center. So for losing one of their side pawns, they control the center. Now, I used to try to defend against the King's Gambit, so to decline the Gambit by by trying to bolster my pawn. However, I've since learnt that it's probably perfectly okay to just straight up capture and you end up with an interesting game. So I captured, they played knight f3, which is fairly normal. And what I'd opted to do immediately here was to play d5. So my logic here is if they capture, then I take back and I've now have more development and I don't want to lose control of the center. So that's my logic here, to immediately be happy to give away, to give back an extra pawn, but to fight immediately for the center. And instead, they opted to play more passively. So with d3, though that does sort of open up the diagonal for the bishop to attack. But now there's no reason why I shouldn't capture the other pawn now. Again, trying to take control and again, having now another attack. Here, my opponent makes a mistake. I think because they wanted to control the center, they thought, look, I don't want to lose that pawn. I'm going to move my pawn forward to d4. However, that knight is straight up hanging. Maybe they thought that that was going to be okay, but I've got, I now can capture that pawn with my queen. So capture, and you can see that was just a straight up hanging knight. Of course, queen captures, with a threat on that bishop, but that's fine. They capture. Here I thought about, straight up liquidating and just being basically being a piece up with a little bit of less development, because of course the opponent will now have brought their queen into the picture. However, I thought, no, I don't think I need to. I think I should be able to just put my knight there. If they capture, I can capture back, and so then I basically win development, even if we end up trading queens. So I played knight c6, and I was very gratified to see your analysis that was in fact the best move. Opponent now plays bishop b5, ostensibly pinning the knight to the king. Here, however, I thought that I would have a potential clever move with check, and then maybe I'll be able to take that bishop. So with check, opponent sees that strategy, defends, and also blocks check with their knight. So that was a very good move by the opponent, knight c3. And at this point, I basically chickened out. I thought, look, this is going to be complicated. I am a full up head of piece. If I capture, all I am losing is losing just one step of development. I'm not losing a piece. I might as well just liquidate now. I'm still ahead. I thought I won't be as good. As you can see, I'm not quite as good, but I'm not going to end up trapping my queen or doing something silly. So queen captures queen, and then the bishop captures the queen on f4. So they're a little bit more developed now, but I am full up upper piece and upper pawn. So that must count for something. So here I decide what would be a good thing would be to unpin my knight and also giving me sort of the opportunity to long castles as well. And this also helps potentially, provide a defender there. So, that is straight up hanging, of course. And the opponent opted to short castle, so rather than to capture that hanging pawn. So here I decided to, why not, capture with check, force the sort of the king to sort of move to the corner, and now long castles defending that pawn. Everything's looking pretty good, pretty defended, so I was pretty happy. Opponent plays, centralizes one of their rooks, so rook ad1, which is a good move. However, I thought that's okay, that's defended. Threat. Opponent makes the best move, I thought. Was it best move? Okay, no, so they thought, so bishop bashes, that's interesting, isn't it? I wouldn't have thought that was the best move, but, I thought that was still a very good move. So, defends that pawn, though it does now block their rook, so rook no longer has an open file. I thought, yeah, probably bring out my other knight. I thought about here or here, ended up playing there, so interesting to see that that was apparently the better move. They play h3. I assume they weren't too sure what to do. Though, yep, that move does prevent me from going like this. Though, that doesn't really work there because that's defended already. So I now centralize my other rook. So rook he8. The opponent now plays bishop g5, attacking the knight. And here I was just really just trying to find ways of doing balance trades, because if I just do balance trades, I'll maintain my material advantage and I should win. So ask the question, what are they going to do? Captures, yep, captures. So they win a pawn back, but I'm still a piece up. I thought it was okay. Here I decided to play a6 because basically I just wanted to I just wanted to stop the potential infiltration onto the b5 square. Captures, that's fine. Here I decide to do, move my move bishop to c6, having an attack on that pawn. That, of course, pins the king, and potentially I thought that that could be very, very strong. Opponent now lines up their rooks into a battery. I didn't really think that that helped them, given that that square is sort of defended lots of ways, so it makes no sense for the opponent really to do that. Here I was in a trying to attack that pawn on g2. However, the opponent brings their rook to have an extra defender. I now move my knight out of the way to sort of reveal an attack on that rook. They stay on the rank, which, yeah, that's the correct move. Here I thought, trade. Let's trade, double their pawns. That's probably good for me. Here I sort of moved my bishop to d5, so with a fork of the pawn and the rook. Rook moves out of the way with an attack on that pawn. I thought that was probably okay because I thought that I would have another fork here with that bishop. So I captured. So I thought I was very clever with that fork, but actually the opponent has a get out of jail card, which is check. So able to move that out of the way. They capture with another check. So, but that's fine. Balanced trades. So actually that was ended up being fine for me. So I had some balance trades, but I did end up losing a pawn, but I am still a piece up. So I still have the bishop pair and the rook. And with being a pawn down, it's probably less problematic for me because these pawns are doubled. Bring my bishop back again, looking at that weak g2 pawn, pinning the pawn. Opponent plays bishop d3. I wasn't entirely sure the purpose of that move. So rook g8, but there we go. That sort of makes sense, providing, again, a defense of that pawn. And here I thought, let's start pushing pawns. They capture. That was fine, I suppose. Apparently that move was better. That move was better, but I didn't quite see that in the actual game. So I was a little bit annoyed by by myself. I straight up hung that pawn, but it's still kind of okay. And basically, I'm now asking the opponent to trade because pretty much they have to. I thought that they just had to. And again, balanced trades. Happy for balanced trades. So now start pushing these pawns on the king side. That's all okay. Yep. And basically this pawn, it's almost impossible for this pawn to not be promoted, given that I've got the bishop, the king, and the pawn. And also I have the rook providing support. So as we go, pawn now to the 3rd rank. Now to the 2nd rank, very, very powerful opponent, forced to block with rook, but now that allows me to put rook to a8, and the next move, they're forced to trade basically a rook for the pawn, unless they want to be queened. Them trying to move the king over is not scary at all, because with the bishop and the king, that's basically a force field. That king cannot cross there without sort of ducking all the way this way or ducking all the way this way. So good game with the opponent. GG. When I looked at all the games on chess.com where I played with the black pieces and the game started with e4, e5, only in about 1 in 30 games did my opponent play the King's Gambit. Interestingly, this is about as common as having the Vienna Game, knight c3, played against me. When we compare this to the most common opening after e4, e5, which is knight f3, with over 60% of games, we can see that the King's Gambit is not a common opening today. Of the 10 games that I had played against the King's Gambit, I noticed an interesting trend. I tended to lose the games where I played more defensively and declined the Gambit. I tended to win the games where I played aggressively and counterattacked. Perhaps there is something to this against the King's Gambit. I didn't know the theory in this game, but my thinking was to not necessarily focus on holding on to the extra pawn and to not allow white to capture the center. I hope you found this video interesting, and thanks for watching.